Washington.
Please stand. Let's take a moment to reflect on the tragedy that took place in Charleston and the deaths at the hands of a young man that we feel that wasn't in his right mind, took great people from this earth. Let us pray. May your goodness and love be present among us today. Come bless our gathering with unity, hope, and vision. Lord, we pray for unity. Build in us all the deep respect for one another so that your church may be one. Lord, we pray for hope. Come straight your hope within our hearts. Renew our faith. Lord, we pray for vision. May your vision fill our lives as we seek to reveal your love. We ask all these in your gracious name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. I do want to let the public know that council is during the month of July. We have no tie July, so you will see council members with no tie for the regular session meetings, both this Tuesday and the third Tuesday. Next, we'll have the presentation of resolution. Resolution recognizing Deputy Johnson for his act of heroism in rescuing two citizens when their boat capsized in Pinewood Lake. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'll just read the resolution. A resolution recognizing Deputy Tabane Johnson act of heroism. Whereas Deputy Johnson, a native of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and attended Benedict College, where he studied teaching of music. And whereas Deputy Johnson has won many awards based on his musical talent and held memberships with several professional musical organizations. Whereas in his free time, Deputy Johnson provides independent vocal coaching for college students, community, and church members. And whereas in addition to his musical talent, Deputy Johnson also his love for acting and has several roles in Benedict College's performing arts company and the community players. Whereas although Deputy Johnson possesses musical and acting talents, on June 5th, 2015, those talents were transcended by tremendous heroism. On this day, he jumped into Pinewood Lake, located in Lower Richland community, and saved the lives of two citizens with their boat capsized. Whereas Deputy Johnson worked with Richland County Sheriff Department, where he has worked for a total of 8 years in several capacities, such as Special Services Division and as School Resource Officer, Uniform Patrol Division, Region 3, and is currently a Master Deputy in Region 1. Therefore, now it be resolved that Richland County Councilman Norman Jackson, District 11, and the Richland County Council recognize the unselfish and courageous act of valor demonstrated by Deputy Tabane Johnson. I'd like to thank you for what you have done. The citizens of Richland County appreciate it, and we thank you and the work of the Sheriff Department and your support. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Next, we'll have approval of the minutes, regular session, June 16, 2015. Chair recognizes.
Move to approve.
Got a motion for approval.
Second.
It's been properly second. Discussion. Mr. Malinowski.
Just one comment, Mr. Chair, and that's on page 10, under presentations. We had the Lower Richland Sewer Project where the Congaree River Keeper gave a presentation, and he wound up with 6 bullet points in there about his presentation, yet the citizen that spoke afterward, Ms. Wendy Brawley, the only comment there was read a prepared statement. I think we need to be equal and fair in saying what people are doing, because Mr. Stangler's was a prepared statement also. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 2B, zoning public hearing, June 23rd, 2015.
Move
Chair, motion for approval has been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Washington.
make a motion to add item to the agenda for executive session,
Okay.
and that item is to discuss a possible contractual matter.
All right. Okay, got a motion. It's been properly second to add that item.
What was the motion item again?
Contractual.
matter.
All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Any other amendments?
Move approval of the agenda as amended.
Okay, got approval of the agenda as amended. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
where are
Dickerson,
we going to put that item that we just approved?
under attorneys.
Attorney's
Receipt.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Report of the attorney for executive session items. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, we have 4 items for executive session. 3A, that is a lawsuit, and that is for purpose of receiving legal advice. 3B is pending litigation.
Could you speak into your mic, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Okay.
that's a little better.
I'm sorry. 3B is pending litigation. That's a road closing petition. 3C, which was just added, is a contractual matter. And you also, Mr. Chairman and members of council, have item 25C, which is also a contractual matter coming out of the Pinewood Lake Ad Hoc Committee for executive session.
All right.
Those are all the matters for executive session.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Malinowski.
I get clarification, Mr. Chair. The executive session matter that we added, that was a contractual matter. Can we know generally what it might be about?
Mr. Chair, and I apologize, Mr. Malinowski. Contractual matter pertains to a potential project.
Thank you.
It'll clear it up.
Okay.
There's no action. It got to be followed by it.
All right. You done, Mr. Malinowski?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Citizens' input for items on the agenda not requiring a public hearing. We have 4 citizens signed up to speak. If you can come, when you come forward, if you can state your name and address for the record, and you have up to 2 minutes to speak. First, we have Ms.
And all 3 of them are referencing item 26A1,
Okay. And it's in reference to,
the move to engage a private entity to temporarily manage the utilities department.
okay. All right, next, we have Ms. Helen Bradley and Mrs. Lottie Wesley.
Helen Taylor Bradley. I reside at 1916 Martin Luther King Boulevard, Hopkins, South Carolina. I'm coming in reference to the item 26. I am speaking on behalf of the Hopkins and Lauriston Citizens United as a spokesperson, and we're very much against privatizing the water and sewer. We know what that will do, and we want to ask that you do not make a move on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Wesley?
Good evening. Lottie P. Wesley, 164 Sumter Loop, Hopkins, South Carolina. With the prioritizing of the water and sewer, we've already gone through one disaster, and we all know about that. Failure, pure failure. Temporary to some means to continue forever. So whatever you make your little agreements and however you want to set it up, keep in mind what you do. The battle for today might be the battle for you tomorrow. So, repeating history, Aberdeen Park, Franklin Park, Hopkins Elementary, Hopkins Middle, Gaston Elementary were all privatized and managed, pure failure. That's where and why we are where we are today. Keep in mind, all that you're doing is for someone that do not live in the Lower Richland community. All your amendments and provisions are to support the developers, not Lower Richland community. Whatever happened to the people, now it's for the developers. That don't sound right. Wheeling, dealing, buying and selling, not taking in consideration of the people. It will not only affect the people of Lower Richland, it's going to affect the people of the whole state. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Is there a Myers? Ms. Myers and then Ms. Stallworth.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Myers. I live at 222 Sagemont Drive, Hopkins, and I'm here. I am a widow, and usually when I think of privatizing, it's usually more money than it would usually be. So I would like to y'all to take into consideration the people that are affected by this. To me, it's all about the land, and I would like to hold on to my little piece. It's been very hard since my husband passed away almost 3 years ago, and it's just bill after bill, and you're just getting overwhelmed with all these little fees and stuff. And when you're on a fixed income, you know, that tells a lot. It's only so much money to go around, and it's always more and more fees. So please take into consideration people like me and other people that are on fixed incomes can barely pay the bills that they already have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
My name is Marie Stallworth, and I'm with Sustainable Midlands. I understand that the county has staffing problems and concerns and the continuing need for an effective and efficient utilities department. However, my concern is that any sort of RFP or contractual agreement that is decided upon that is very specific and that it is also temporary, and that we don't continue this out for a longer period than necessary, and that we actually fulfill the staffing needs, and that there's an ongoing search for the staff during this time, any sort of agreement that is sent out to a consulting company. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stallworth. That concludes the citizens' input.
Chair, I have a point of personal privilege.
Mr. Rose.
I'd like to recognize School Board Commissioner Vince Ford, who's here, and I also want to recognize Dr. Lonnie Randolph, head of the South Carolina NAACP, is also in attendance.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Randolph's hiding up there from us.
Next, we have report of the county administrator, Mr. McDonald.
I have no report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Next, we'll have report of the clerk of council, Ms. McDaniels. Thank you, Ms. McDaniels. Report of the chairman. There's no report as well. Open and close of public hearing. The item we have is number 5, an ordinance amending the Richland County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 6, Buildings and Buildings Regulation, Article 3, Building Codes, Section 6 through 84, boarded up structures. Subsection D, Paragraph 1, so as to change the language. The permit fee shall be $25.53 for residential buildings and $51.05 for mixed use and commercial buildings. The permit fee shall be charged at the rate on the current Richland County fee schedule. That public hearing is open. No one signed up to speak. That public hearing is now closed. Approval of consent items. We have items 6 through 18. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to remove items 15, 17, and 18.
15, 17, and 18.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Any more? Any more? All right.
Move approval of the consent items remaining.
All right, we got a motion for approval. It's been properly second of the remaining consent items. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 15, if you would refer to the updated agenda, page 54. Let me make sure I got this right here now. I think it's 54. No, that's not it. Anyway, in our agenda, it's asking for about an action plan for violations. What I have read is that we already have this plan in place. These are all addressed in the employee handbook. And I think, based on what Mr. Jackson is asking for, that the assistant clerk of council, Ms. Only, has all of the information available. I think that it needs to be provided to Mr. Jackson to review so that any specific changes he's recommending, he can bring forward and we can act on it. And so that's...
Malinowski.
Let me respond to this, Chairman. I thought that we moved to table that.
I don't know.
Where's Mr.
Not my committee.
Where's Mr. Madden? Is he here? Yeah. What was the action on that taken by the committee? Wasn't that the one that we tabled?
Mr. Pierce, if you look on page 53, under the notes, they'll list the actions from the committee meeting in June. And basically, the committee recommended that council direct staff to compile the info.
Stand corrected. You didn't send me my cheat sheet this week.
Yes, you did. Get there and read it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Did you want to speak to this item?
Yes.
Mr. Washington.
I want to speak.
I got it.
And I want to ask Mr. Jackson, the intent of this motion was to cover directives and policies of the county based on ordinances, correct? This just wasn't a personnel action, was it?
No.
Okay.
You done, Mr. Washington?
Well, you may give clarity to it.
Okay.
Because I thought it was more than just the personnel information. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, my motion, if you notice, it said staff to abide by all policies, right? And develop an action plan for violators of those policies if you do not abide by those policies. So I'm not sure what my colleague to the right, Mr. Malinowski, is saying, but I made the motion because of certain things that's been happening and there's no accountability. So therefore, I made this motion that we abide by all policies and those violators or those who decide not to go use a policy will develop some action, disciplinary action or whatever action is necessary. And that's why I made the motion.
So are we basically just saying to the administrator to uphold the
That's right.
the rules and policies of the
Yes.
of the handbooks? Okay.
And if,
All right.
if there's no action plan for violators, develop one. Because not all of the policies have an action plan
Okay.
for violation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Dickerson.
I think I was going to follow up with what Mr. Jackson was saying because I have noticed that there were 2 occasions when there should have been some policy or some directive that should have taken place and it did not. And so I think that motion came out of a lack of, may I say your name, Mr. Our administrator not acting. We didn't think that he took the appropriate action on on 2 or 3 particular issues that transpired and no action was taken. So I wanted to back him up on that particular issue.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. You done, Ms. Dickerson?
Yeah, I'm through.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Mr. Malinowski.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify for Mr. Jackson, my comment was only based on page 55 of the current agenda where it says, in summary, the county handbook speaks to employees abiding by policies, procedures, guidelines, and speaks to disciplinary action. So that's all I was trying to point out, that based on what your motion was, Mr. Jackson, it looks like they're telling us it's already there. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Rose.
Yeah, I just want to say that since there was some comments about something that may have been done inappropriately by staff, it was my opinion, and I think maybe some of the others, that there was nothing done inappropriately. So I just wanted to put out there that by no means was that a unanimous thought process that anything had been done inappropriate. Additionally, I think we already have a process in place, and that is the buck stops with the county administrator and his executive staff. And so violators can be dealt with appropriately, and ultimately things come to this council that are employment in nature. And so we already have a process in place with a hierarchy in government. So I just wanted to say that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Jackson.
Again, I understand what you're saying. They can be dealt with. They should be dealt with. When I see something is happening and certain action is not being taken, I have that right to at least make a motion or bring it forward to my colleagues that we should take or should hold. I hear what you're saying, what the handbook says. But the handbook can say one thing, but something different is practiced. So I just want to make sure, that's why I brought the motion, that we continue or carry the action if there's no action. This is the biggest. Or we make sure we carry actions on anyone who violates any of his policies. I understand that the handbook is there, right, and it has its rules, and it's supposed to be, but it's not. Thank you.
All right. Chair, entertain a motion.
The motion is from the committees for approval.
Okay, I need a second to that because we took it.
The committee, it doesn't need a second.
It came out of approval?
Yeah, it came
Okay.
out of approval.
All right. Any more discussion?
Matter of fact, it came out unanimous approval.
All right. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. That motion carries. Item 17.
Item number 17, Mr. Chair, on page, and this is a 3-reading item. I'd just like to see these things provided to us by 3rd reading on page 75 of our agenda at the very bottom line. It refers to Exhibits A and B. We do not have Exhibits A and B in this agenda. At least they weren't in the original one I got, unless they've been snuck in the amended one. And also on page 77. On page 77, under number 7, utilities and maintenance. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go down to the 4th line where it says that our utilities staff will provide daily routine janitorial services, which include trash removal, but exclude any blood-borne pathogen waste. And then it says also it includes vacuuming and damp mopping of tiled surfaces. I've got a little bit of concern if we've got our utility staff vacuuming and damp mopping tiled surfaces that could have blood on them. who knows what they may come in contact with. So I think anything that could have some type of blood on it should be done by the group leasing it and not our staff. So I would make a motion for approval of this with that particular change so we don't put our staff in jeopardy.
Okay, can I get a second to that?
Second.
That came out of committee?
This is first reading.
Yes, first reading. It's been properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Rose,
Me.
think you want to discuss?
As Mr. McDonald, as to number 17, Richland County, we offer a free eye clinic to low-income citizens who otherwise may not have the eye care that we provide. And that's something that we can all be really proud of. And I know there was an issue with the space as to the eye clinic. I just wanted to make sure, have those needs been addressed and what's before us?
It's my understanding, Mr. Rose, that they have been addressed, and I think we've gone through a couple of different iterations of the lease agreement or of the proposed plan, but I think we are now at a point where everybody who is involved has the space that's needed.
Thank you.
Rose. Mr. Pierce.
Mr. Malinowski, this group has spent $800,000 or preparing to spend $800,000 up there. It's a very time-sensitive thing. We're trying to get it through. That's why you did not have all the material. You will have those answers. I am concerned, though, about this motion about and I believe that it is worth looking into, but to simply make a motion to, would you accept that we have staff review that issue and make a recommendation as to how that could be dealt with, rather than simply audit? I mean,
That's fine. I just want to make sure our employees are safe.
right. But rather than change just carte blanche.
That's fine. I'm
Make a
fine with that,
decision.
Mr. Pierce.
So you withdraw that motion?
Yeah,
Mr. McDonald, can
use
you do
Mr.
that?
Pierce's.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Okay. So the motion was for approval.
So the motion on the table is for approval. Any more discussion? Ms.
Question. I just want to make sure that I understood that this is just, everyone understand that this is just the first reading, so all of those questions can be addressed, I'm sure, before we do third reading on this, that we would have addressed Mr. Malinowski's concerns and any other concerns that any council members may have, and anyone else, they can get them to us, and we'll be more than happy to get them to the administrator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Ms. Dixon, okay. All right, the motion on the table is for approval. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege before we go on to the next item.
Mr. Pierce.
Some of the clinicians that are going to be working there were here tonight. Could you raise your hand? And these are some, I believe, dental folks.
Yes.
And ophthalmology folks that came out tonight to be supportive of this, and we appreciate you all coming out and being here for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Next item, Mr. Malinowski, item 18.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 18 on page 84 of our agenda. I guess to sum it up here, number 3, under background, A3, it indicates there that that the county, once funds are given, needs to be provided at the end of the fiscal year a detailed description of the purposes for which the money was used. And I did not see this. I would like to, I understand that Mr. Driggers was the one possibly instrumental in bringing this forward to us. I think we should have all of this information to include the identity of and addresses of some of these groups. And as the state law says, we need to say what was the purpose of the donation, and if it was an emergency, or what was it? And so until we get those items, I would, what?
Go ahead, Mr. Malinowski, you still have the floor.
Well, until we get that information to make it complete and be within accordance with state law, I'd move to defer and have Mr. Driggers bring it back to us. That's all.
Okay, that motion dies for lack of second.
Oh, well, okay. You're not gonna debate it then, okay?
We're not going to debate it.
All right.
No, deferral, nobody seconded, so it dies for lack of second. Any more discussion?
Let me
Mr.
just
Pierce.
briefly speak to the motion. If you recall, Mr. Malnick, we have to do this in advance each year. We did the same thing last year. You have to do it in advance, and then you fill in the blanks later with all of that material that you're talking about.
But Mr. Pierce, on page 85, under the financial...
One second, Mr. Malinowski.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Just pointing that out.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Malinowski.
I mean, I'm just going to clarify that by saying on page 85 of the agenda, under financial impact, it shows payments were already made, and that's what we were told, that we're approving those payments that have been made.
That's Mr. McDonald.
That's what I thought we were doing.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, I can try. If the council will remember, the state legislation a little over a year ago changed with respect to individual or organization donations from local governments. And the change in the legislation required that two things be done. Number one, you formally appropriate the money as a line item in the budget, but secondly, that you identify the agency or the group or whomever is receiving the donation or the sponsorship. The procedure that the council developed a year ago during the budget process for the FY15 budget was that you would appropriate the funding, because at that point you didn't necessarily know who the sponsors would be or who the sponsorships might go to. So you appropriated the money during the budget process and agreed to come back later in the fiscal year once you identified who those groups or those organizations were and identify them by name. And this is what's before you now or tonight, Mr. Chairman, is the second part of that process, which is simply identifying the groups to which the funding or the sponsorships went to.
I'm not going to debate it any further. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Any more discussion? Motion on the table is for approval. Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hey.
That motion carries. Second reading. Item 19, an ordinance amending the Richland County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 26, Land Development, Article 2, Rules of Construction, Definitions, Section 26-22, definitions so as to alter the definition of subdivision. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Got a motion for approval.
Second.
It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 20, an ordinance amending the Richland County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 26, Land Development, Article 4, Amendments and Procedures, Section 26-54, Subdivision Review and Approval, Subsection C, Processes, Paragraph 3, Major Subdivision Review, Subparagraph D, Bonded Subdivision Plat Review and Approval, Clause 6, Recordation and Subparagraph E, Final Subdivision Plat Review and Approval, Clause 6, Recordation so as to properly cross-reference two subsections. Chair, entertain a motion. The motion for approval has been properly second. Any discussion?
Could you read that again, Mr. Chairman?
Just take our word for it, please.
Trust me.
Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 21, an ordinance amending the Richland County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 26, Land Development, so as to add townhouses as permitted use with special requirements in the RM-MD and RM-HD zoning districts. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Got a motion for approval.
Second.
It's been properly second. Discussion. No discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Report of the Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 22 is a lease agreement, the warehouse for Richland Library doing the capital program. The Richland Library has need of space to store their books while the library is being worked on, and they want to enter into a lease for a warehouse to lease to store the books. There was a dissenting vote, so without a unanimous vote, this is not on the, does not appear on the consent agenda.
Okay, so the motion is for,
Well, the motion carried, but it was not unanimous.
so it's a motion for approval coming out of committee.
That's correct.
Okay,
But it was not unanimous.
okay. There was a motion for approval, so the committee recommends approval. Discussion. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What was committee's recommendation?
It was
It was
approval.
approval, but was not unanimous, remember?
Yeah, okay.
I believe you should know.
Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cleared up. That's what it was.
This lease in microscopic form was quite lengthy. After reviewing it, I spoke with our legal department, and it was just told to me today that legal has made some recommended changes and sent this back to the library individuals and have not received a response yet due to the fact I think one or two of the people that would have to respond on behalf of the library is gone on vacation. So without having, I think this is a one reading item, and without having the exact lease in front of us, I don't think we should be approving this portion till we see what the lease actually is in its completeness. If anybody read through this, you'll find out there's an awful lot in here. I think this company previously had leased to some type of a chemical company, and all this information that's in here, I don't think has anything to do with the library leasing it. But again, I would just recommend to defer this till staff gets a response from the library, because we don't know what we're approving at this point.
Is that a motion,
My
Mr.?
motion was to defer until staff, until legal can bring us back
Second.
the actual lease from the library.
Got a motion for deferral. It's been properly second. Deferral is non-debatable. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, division. All in favor of deferral signify by raising your hand.
In favor, Dixon, Malinowski, Rose, Rush, Washington.
All opposed?
Oppose, Jackson, Pierce, Dickerson, Manning. It passed.
Deferral pass.
It passed.
Okay, that motion carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
may I ask one question on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McDonald, and Mr. Smith, can you tell us how time sensitive this information is? I mean, I know we're just gonna store books, but what
Yeah,
does
let me-
chemical have to do with it?
Let me just tell you what I know about this, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you.
When this,
Can you
when this,
explain it to me? I know,
Told us in advance.
pardon me?
Well, it's after the vote, but if you want, just for quick clarity.
I
if you
just
want.
need clarification. I don't care about that. I mean, because,
Well,
before, we should have asked.
I'm asking him to say it, Ms.
Thank you.
Ms. Dickerson.
if you,
Mr. Smith, can you quickly?
I'll try to do the best.
All right.
If you recall, when this came to committee, I asked that you forward this to the full council with a recommendation of approval, subject to changes that we were looking forward to getting from the library. The changes came to my office today at 5:17. That's when I got the changes back from the library attorney. I had spoken to him several times over the last couple of weeks. And it was my understanding that a Mr. Sullivan was out of town and they were having problems communicating. This is a one vote approval. We have our next meeting scheduled for the 21st, and hopefully we should have time between now and that time to get what he sent today read and in order for you to approve on the 21st.
Thank you very much, because I'd like to hear the explanation coming from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickerson. Next, we have report of rules and appointment. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 23. The Board of Zoning and Appeals, one vacancy. The committee recommends to reappoint Mr. William Wallace Smith, Jr.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate someone. What's the best way to do that? Should I nominate that individual, or should we divide the question? As far as take everyone up, or I'd like to just nominate one person.
You can do that.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Miss Ray Borders Gray.
I'll second that.
All right, so now we have an election between those two.
Yeah, so there's a nominations for Ray Borders Gray, and that'll be the first one up. All in favor of
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Dickerson?
would that person be added to this list?
She's on there. She's item D.
On the list.
It's on the next
She's here
page.
tonight.
Oh, okay, on the next,
Too, as well.
What?
because I don't see.
It's D.
It's D.
D, what's her name? Ms. Gray?
Yeah.
She's present.
Oh, okay.
She's here.
Question.
Miss-
I knew what you're doing.
Ms. Gray, did she not, Mr. Malinowski,
Yes, sir.
did Ms. Gray apply for multiple positions?
Yes, for this as well as the Richland Library Board.
Okay. And William Wallace Smith is returning. He's been on the board.
He's an incumbent.
But he's
He's
the
an
current
incumbent.
vice chair.
Okay, the vice chair of the board.
Has he served 2 years, 2 terms, or this is his first term?
This is he's in his second term, I believe.
Secretary. This
And he's chair?
vice chair.
Vice chair.
Can I ask Ms. Gray a question pertaining to these two positions? Do you have a preference of either position?
Well, let's just vote on it. Let's just vote
I'm
on it.
asking the question, what did she say in committee?
All right, hold on here. You got that? Hold on, I'll get it for you. I didn't know I'd have to go back to notes. You remember what she told me? Her first choice was the library board.
He likes to read books.
All right, Mr. Chair.
All right. First, we have Ms. Ray Borders Gray. All in favor of Ms. Gray signify by raising your hand. All right. Mr.
I didn't hear him call it out. I'm sorry.
Rose.
Oh.
Jackson.
Yeah, just call him up.
Yeah.
In favor of Ms. Gray, Rose, and Jackson.
All right. All in favor of Mr. Smith.
In favor of Mr. Smith, Dixon, Malinowski, Pierce, Rush, Dickerson, Washington, Manning.
Okay, Mr. Smith is reappointed. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 24, the Planning Commission. There are several additional interviews to be conducted, so that is being held in committee, and that completes my report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Other items, report of Pinewood Lake Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chair, the committee met and moved to accept the operations plan as an addition to the original plan passed in 2013 with the Decker Boulevard plan.
There's no action required.
Can you explain that again? Can you say it one? So I think we need clarity on that.
In 2013, there was an operations plan passed for Decker Boulevard and Pinewood Lake. And one of the staff members brought it to our attention that an operations plan was already passed. However, staff had drafted an operations plan for Pinewood Lake. So what the committee decided to do is, because there was a plan originally passed, add this plan to the existing Pinewood Lake plan for any modifications.
Committee's recommendation.
Okay, discussion. Mr. Dickerson.
I always get a little bit confused when we start talking about the Pinewood. Is this the Kaufman Pond, extension of the Kaufman Pond?
Yeah, Kaufman Pond / Pinewood Lake.
Kaufman Pond / Pinewood Lake, is that the way it was actually written up? Because I'm just recently hearing, I never heard it discussed as Pinewood Lake. I heard it discussed as Kaufman Pond.
Okay.
So can somebody please help me? Thank you.
It was called Kaufman Pond, but the right name is Pinewood Lake. Citizens in the area always call it Kaufman Pond, right? But the name is Pinewood Lake.
When did it get the name Pinewood Lake?
In 18 something.
The dam was built, the dam was built in 1918. So
It's a community called Kaufman, no, it's a Kaufman Pond, but
It was
the right
before
name,
the
the
dam.
appropriate name is Pinewood Lake.
Okay, so
the
I
property
still have the
name
floor,
Pinewood
Mr.
Yeah,
So Mr. McDonald,
Yes, ma'am.
what the operation plan that we are approving tonight, that the committee recommend for approval tonight, is actually the plan that was set up for what we called back then in 2013 Kaufman Pond.
No, ma'am, not exactly. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, please, can you clarify
explain? Yes.
what the plans are? And because that was a park, that was Decker is a different
Yes.
animal, so it's not different? Okay, well, please explain, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. Back when the Decker property, the Decker Center, what we're now calling the Decker Center, was purchased by the county, and the development of that property, or redevelopment of that property began, there were inquiries from different community groups and organizations wanting to know if the property would be available for public use. The parking lot, the community room, and the facility in general would be available for events, for public community events, and so forth. In response to that, the staff drafted an operations plan for the Decker property, and the council ultimately reviewed that and approved it. And as part of that plan, I think we had just purchased or had recently purchased the Kaufman property, or Pinewood Lake property. And so the operations plan for the Decker Center also included the Pinewood property too, because it was public property, and the intent for the Pinewood Lake property was that it would be used for public and community events. So there was some language in the Decker Center document which is really, it was intended to be just a generic county property operations document, but there was language in that which also included Pinewood Lake. The staff recently drilled down to, I think, maybe a more specific document, similar document, but more specific to Pinewood Lake. That was presented today at the Pinewood Lake ad hoc committee meeting, and it was decided by the committee, or recommended by the committee, that the staff's latest recommendations for the operation document for Pinewood Lake be incorporated or merged into the previous document for Decker Center, so that we have one document which covers, again, Decker Center, Pinewood Lake, and ultimately any other properties that the county may purchase and have available for public events.
Y'all still have the phone, Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Pinewood Lake is recreational, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, is Decker Boulevard recreational?
Decker Boulevard was not, I don't think, intended to be recreation property, but there is in the design a community room for community events, neighborhood meetings, and so forth. And it was also decided that the parking lot could also be used for events and festivals and so forth.
Okay, so we can use hospitality dollars between these two projects?
No, ma'am. We didn't use hospitality.
I see all the frowns, but the fact of the matter is that will this same operational procedure be addressed for all of the facilities that Richland County have, that means that anybody can use those facilities? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is the intent, yes, ma'am.
I still don't understand it, but I really don't understand it, but I still, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Any more discussion? So, just my clarity too. This is an operational plan to, can you explain it one more time? Or can someone else on the committee?
Just said, there's an operational plan approved in September of 2013 for DECA and Pinewood Lake. But staff decided to tweak it a little bit more to add some more to Pinewood Lake because some things may be similar, but Pinewood Lake as a park will have more or different operations than the center that's built on
Okay,
the Boulevard.
okay.
So they added some language,
So are they gonna,
the existing language.
is this a one reading item?
Yes.
So the language that they added, was that added today or it was added before?
Yes, well, let me explain again. The staff brought the language for us to approve. Then one of the staff members said we already had.
You've never seen it before.
It was already approved in 2013.
Yeah, but today's.
Yes. The recommendation, right, that was presented to the committee,
Yeah.
right, we decided to add that to the existing one.
Mr. Chair?
I'll put you down. Okay, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand what Mr. Jackson is saying. I was on the committee, and because of being on the committee, of course, I read the information and know what's going on here. However, we actually don't have the final operational plan written yet, do we?
Mr. Malinowski is correct. And if I may add to that, I was just going to suggest that there's no urgency with getting this approved today. If you would feel more comfortable with us bringing it back on the 21st, I think we can refine the document based on the committee's meeting earlier this afternoon and then have you a fresh, revised document in the agenda for the meeting on the 21st, which would only be a 2-week delay, so that would not be a problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, I'm
Malinowski.
going to make a motion to defer this item to our July 21st meeting so that we can have clarity and we'll be able to review the documents that we need to before we can vote on. Although I understand what we're trying to do, I just feel like we just need to really have a very clear understanding as to how it's going to be done. So I'll make a motion to defer to the 21st.
A second.
Got a motion for deferral. It's been properly second. Deferral is non-debatable. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor, Dixon, Malinowski, Rose, Pierce, Rush, Dickerson, Washington, Manning.
All opposed?
Opposed, Jackson.
All right, that motion carries. Mr. Jackson.
The committee met on the emergency construction of restrooms. The committee decided to move this forward with staff working with the contractor to discuss the original contract amount, see if the contractor can meet those standards with the standard design that was discussed in the contract. In other words, initially, there's a certain square footage approved by the contractor. Recently, the committee, the staff looked at some other type facilities, which was a little bit larger in square footage, and the price sort of escalated. So what the committee decided to do is hold the contractor to build it to the square footage that was approved initially in the initial contract and to hold it to that price. And staff would work with the contractor to.
So can we keep that in committee until you come back with the final price?
Mr. Chair?
Is that staying in committee?
We're going in executive session for some discussion also.
Oh,
so
that's your item, okay. All right.
Okay, well,
Thank
I'll
you.
wait till we go into the executive session to discuss this item.
And the other item will be in executive session, and I'll report after we leave the executive session.
All right, well, I'll hold out my motion.
All right.
Thank you.
That concludes your,
That concludes my report.
thank you, Mr. Jackson. Next, we have report of the Sewer Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed in the ad hoc committee meeting for the sewer, it was discussed about the transitions that are taking place in the utilities department with the resignation of the the director and also the deputy director. And it's a feeling amongst council that there is a flux with with operations, with all the projects taking place. And that's why I put this motion out there for a temporary private entity to run a utilities department, but also do an assessment why they're there. Because we really need to assess the overall system and what our intentions are as a body. What's still left out there is whether or not this body is going to move forward with the previous proposals that were put in front of us. We need to have that conversation, but staff is in conversations now with possible directors. So the motion from committee was to move forward with an RFP development and go ahead and develop that RFP just in case things do not work out with the potential employee who will take over as director. And this is just pretty much a backup plan.
Okay, you heard staff recommendation.
Committee's
Committee's recommendation was to move forward with to develop an RFP. Any discussion?
Not to
Ms.
issue
Digger,
one, just to
to develop.
Okay,
Ms. Dickerson.
I just want to, would you please clarify what he just said?
Yes, ma'am. If the council approves the motion, we would develop a request for proposals for a consultant management firm to potentially be under contract to temporarily manage the utilities department and provide an assessment of the department. But that would not give us the authority to issue the RFP nor to go any further than simply putting a draft document together. And as Mr. Washington correctly indicated, we are in discussions right now with potential candidates to fill the director position, and we'll have more information as to where that process is about mid next week. But the RFP would be, as Mr. Washington also indicated, would be the backup plan in case the situation with the candidates for director don't work out.
So right now, we are in the process of working through candidates right now to take this particular position.
That's correct.
And if in fact these candidates does not measure up to the RFP, which would, the qualifications that are going to be outlined in the RFP, then you all will put that out. Is that correct?
If the candidates don't meet, well, if for whatever reason we cannot work out an arrangement or an agreement to hire one of the candidates to fill the position as a county employee, then the backup would be to issue the RFP to bring in a firm to temporarily manage the department.
Okay. You'll be hiring a contractual firm to manage that department?
Yes, ma'am. Potentially.
If you don't get an employee?
Yes.
All right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Mr. Rose.
I mean, this is an essential service, and how would we not be able to hire somebody? I mean, how would we not find someone qualified that would want to come and work here in the entire United States? I mean, it seems like, is there a shortage of qualified people in the country? Or, I just don't understand how we're getting to this point where there's an emergency action plan in place. And
Right. Mr. Rose, we actually, the applicant pool has not been the greatest. I think possibly one of the reasons is, and again, Mr. Washington mentioned this, the fact that there's still this question mark as to whether the county is going to privatize the function. There was discussion at one point about even selling the system or keeping it in-house, and I think that may have potentially created some hesitancy for potential candidates to show an interest. I don't know that, and no one has said that, but I think that has been a concern. But I will say we do have at least one very good candidate that we've already had one discussion with, or having a follow-up discussion with the same candidate next week, and we think that may work out to both the county's advantage and to the individual's advantage.
Couldn't we address, if those are the concerns, I mean, is there a way to address that with an employment contract? You know, or should the council, I'm just thinking out loud here, I mean, should the council decide, and maybe we vote on whether it should be, I mean, although there's been discussions, you know, in the not so recent past about this, there's never been any vote of council to privatize or not privatize. Should we put that behind us, that make the applicant pool better, or is there a way to go out and seek who we'd want, who is well respected in the field, and give them protection in an employment contract to say, we're going to in the event that council privatizes, you're protected for X, Y, and Z. I mean, I don't want to. This is a very important position, and I don't want to have. I want to have the right person. I want to have a great person for the citizens of Richland County, and I feel like we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot trying to fill this position right now.
Yeah.
And that's my concern.
As we discussed in the committee meeting, Mr. Rose, I think we being staff, Mr. Hammett and myself, will be in a much better position to answer that as of the first part of next week. But again, we do have a very good candidate, and we're both hopeful that is going to work out, and we think it very well may. So, but I could give you much more information first of next week and report back to you if that would be helpful to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apparently, my motion was misunderstood at the committee level because I made the motion to create the RFP to perform an assessment of the department, not to put out an RFP to hire a consultant. It was to perform the assessment of the department, and that would be done in conjunction with the potential hiring of a director. If we did not hire a director, I still did not make a motion to move forward with putting out an RFP to hire a consultant.
But I think the discussion was that the RFP would be for the consultant who would do the assessment. Did you?
It was for correct. It was for a consultant to conduct an assessment, not to run the department.
Oh, I see. And again, you know, nothing will move forward until we've closed the book on the candidates that we're talking to. So even if you approve moving forward with the RFP, and now thank you for the clarification, we still won't move forward with anything until we know more about that candidate, and then we'll bring that back to you so you'll know where we're going from that point.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Washington.
Yeah, to clarify Mr. Rose's point, and I agree with you, Mr. Rose, the body needs to clarify what direction this whole utilities department is going to go in. The point for this motion is we have a large gap between hiring someone, putting them in place, getting them ramped up to run the office. We have major projects going on right now, and we have a hole in there. We got a director gone and a deputy director. So my point for putting this forward to fill that gap until we hire somebody, but until we got briefed this today about the potential, this is a stopgap. If the candidate falls through, we can move forward with this with the understanding we're going to be out in August, and then that's going to be another lag time. But I hope it does work out for the candidate because he is very experienced. But what I'm concerned about is the time that we've allowed that office, that department, to stay wide open. And I know staff is doing whatever they can to fill the gap, but we just need to fill that hole as soon as possible. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just a little curious in terms of you know, the role of our responsibility as council and administration, that, you know, at what levels in the organization do we, council, make decisions about whether they need to hire an interim, a temporary, an interim private, an interim non-private? I'm just a little curious about that in this whole situation.
Yeah, you can speak to that.
Yes, Mr. Manning, I think that's a good question. The way I see it from the administrator's perspective, if I have a vacancy at a department director level, then I'm going, as county administrator, I'm going to appoint probably an interim until we can fill the position permanently, which I've done here. Mr. Hammett is actually serving as the interim in light of the fact that that Mr. Metz, the former director, left, and now the deputy director just left last week. But yes, Mr. Hammett has been serving as the interim for, I guess, probably what feels like months or maybe years. And we have since during that interim period, we have been recruiting and looking for a permanent replacement.
Well, do you have authority to contract out privately if you need to until you have the position filled? Yes, I do have the authority to contract up to a certain dollar amount. Yes, as the administrator, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Mr. Malinowski, I got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for one additional bit of clarification, during the committee meeting, the interim director, Mr. Hammett, and our administrator, Mr. McDonald, was asked about the major projects that Richland County is involved in right now, and we were told that we are in good shape regarding those major projects. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Washington.
Quick question. Do we have a consultant running the OSBO office right now?
Yes, we have a consultant working with the office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. All right, clarification coming out of committee, because I'm hearing two different. Can we clarify what the motion is coming out of committee?
I'm going to ask staff to go ahead and read.
Do you know?
The clerk.
Do you know what we had coming out of committee?
As far as
the motion coming out of the
Sewer
ad hoc
committee.
we will have to pull the exact recording, but the discussion transpired as far as whether we were going to draft a RFP. Mr. Washington's initial motion was for us to secure a consultant. Mr. Malinowski made a motion coming out of executive session that we draft a RFP to, in fact, do a analysis of the utilities department in the effect if staff was unable
That was
to
the
offer
motion,
position.
the recommendation out of that I put forward.
It sounded a little different.
That's correct. That's correct what you said.
Okay, so is that the same motion that Mr. Washington put? That's a different motion. That's
Two
what I'm
different
saying.
motions.
That's what I'm saying. Those are two
No, the
different.
motion I put, all right. Whatever she just spoke of is the motion.
It's the motion.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right. So the motion on the table is to, you want to say it again? Or
The
Mr.
recommendation that came out of committee was to draft a RFP for the analysis of the utilities department if staff, in fact, could not negotiate with the current candidate.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. All right, that's the motion that's on the table. Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.
That ends my report, Mr. Chair.
Do you have 27?
Got 27.
No,
Was
that's
that
not.
27 is an appointment of code.
Okay, all right. Item 27, a resolution to appoint and commission Raymond C. Smith as Code Enforcement Officer for proper security, general welfare, and convenience of Richland County. Can I get unanimous
Move
consent?
approval, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have citizens' input. We have 3 citizens signed up to speak. You have up to 2 minutes to speak. When you come forward, if you can state your name and address for the record. Ms. Helen Bradley, Ms. Lottie Wesley, and Ms., is it Rhonda Myers? Okay.
Helen Taylor Bradley, 1916 Martin Luther King Boulevard, Hopkins, South Carolina. Just like to make a few observations and to say something. Being honest with the constituents.
Ms. Bradley, could you pull that microphone down? No, toward,
to me?
that closer to get to you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I said I wanted to make a few observations. And first, being honest with the constituents it will go a long way in keeping the public trust. Right now, I feel that you all have destroyed the public's trust in the way that council is handling the sewage project for Hopkins, also for Lower Richland. Also, it behooves me to know that the budget process that you do, the meetings that you have where you vote on the budget, one of what I consider is the most important things you do as a council, that you don't bring that back to the regular council meetings to vote on it, is vote on outside of this meeting. That's something I think needs to be looked at, as well as also back to the voting. To gain the public trust of your constituents back, it would seem to me that if you would also consider doing your votes by show of hand or whatever, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, the people that's watching you by TV or by internet, or just, matter of fact, sitting here in the audience, we a lot of times don't know what you're saying, what you're voting on, and it's unfair to the constituents of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Wesley.
Lottie P. Wesley, 164 Sumter Loop, Hopkins, South Carolina. Just a little recap. In coming to these meetings, and I've been coming for a while, it is real sad to be able to ask a question or to try to answer something and you don't get a straightforward answer. It's always like a muffled type thing. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody can come across and answer a straight question. I've always been taught to be clear where people can understand what I'm saying. And what I've observed, and I know a lot of other people has also, I don't know how we do it. I don't know how we even come to these meetings and listen, because everything is so, I don't know, I think maybe, I guess it could be. Now, an answer to this thing about the library. Chemicals stored in one, books stored in the chemicals building. No brainer. Contamination to the books. When the public get them back, somebody got a problem. Real scary situation. Why is everything approved prior to getting the full understanding of what is to be approved? You want to pass it on but approve it. Something wrong with that picture. Why each of you are thinking about what to do, think about how many lives will this affect in what you do. So somebody needs to research versus thinking and hoping. I try to speak clearly so that you and everybody else can understand. But when we get these answers and questions, it's clear as mud. Go figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Ms. Myers. Okay, thank you, Ms. Myers. That completes our citizens' input. One moment, Mr. Jackson. Next, we have executive session. Mr. Smith, could you state the items that we're going into executive session?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, item 3A, and that is to receive legal advice on that particular matter. Item 3B, which is a pending litigation, which is a road closing. Item 3C, which is a contractual matter, and item 25C, which is also a contractual agreement along with, I think, B. Yes, Pinewood Lake.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Now, the chair will entertain a motion for executive session. Got a motion. It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're in executive session.
dress me up in. I told her it was no tie July, and she picked this one out.